Hi, welcome. I'm Bess Rocklitzer, president of the David Familian Foundation. I am so happy to have Karen Moss and David Familian joining us today for our online series, Color Light Motion, created and hosted by Victoria Vesna. Please enjoy the presentation with Karen and David.
Welcome. I'm so delighted to introduce David Familian and Karen Moss. We go way back. Actually, I know Karen even before David, when we were doing an exhibition in the 90s. And I can't even remember all the details.
But I was there.
You were there, but I was working with Karen.
Yeah, I know.
And my relationship with the Vermont Foundation goes way back when I was teaching at UC Santa Barbara, and I kept going, and the collection took on many different forms, and it actually moved from David Berman's home, where certain pieces were integrated into the house. And then as time progressed, they were moved around, and at some point there is even some exercise equipment in between pieces. So at one point it kind of didn't quite make sense. And this is where Karen Moss came to the rescue. And she just did a fabulous job to restructure and make beautiful connections of the pieces and really create a narrative for people who were visiting, which as a private collection was pretty phenomenal. And I say was because it's moved. Unfortunately, not available for us physically in California. And David also was at the same time their partners at the collection. And the two of them, as you will see today, just complement so much the richness of the collection from their points of view. Very different points of view that overlap in a beautiful way. And so we'll welcome both of them, starting with David, who we really have a long relationship with at the Artsci Center. He has visited many times, participated in Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. He had an exhibition at our gallery. He came to our critiques, and just in general has been such a generous contributor to our program. The students love him. He's been teaching in many different programs over the years. And now as the lead artistic director of the Beall Gallery at UC Irvine, well, not now, for over 10 years, actually, he's probably the only gallery that's solely directing art and science collaborations, residencies, and really focused on this kind of work. So with that, I should just also mention he got the Getty PST Art Plus Science grant, which we're very excited to be part of as well. So David, thank you for taking the time, and you'll go first, and then I'll introduce Karen before she talks.
Okay,
welcome, and let's hear what you got for us. We asked, by the way, both to pick a couple of pieces from the collection and elaborate on them.
I want to thank you, Victoria and Bess, both of you, and your commitment to the collection and inviting us multiple times to come visit it. And I've always enjoyed my visits up there, and I'm going to miss them because there's just nowhere where you can see this concentration of work in one place. So let's go. Why is it not working? Oh, there we go. Okay. Here are the four works I'm going to be talking about by Takis and Namjoon Paik. Both Namjoon Paik and Takis use magnetism in their work. Namjoon Paik used magnets to alter an image on a cathode ray tube, and Takis used magnets in many works to suspend metal objects in space. They also use light in unique ways. Both these artists' desire was to make visible the invisible force of electromagnetic energy. Both these artists share a deep affinity with indeterminacy and a deep engagement with the use of new materials new technologies, and taking existing materials and reusing them. They both knew and were influenced by Marcel Duchamp. In 1913, Duchamp decided to stop making paintings. The first three works he made at this time, Bicycle Wheel and Stool, Three Standard Stoppages, and Air to Music, began his influence on the art world. These three works explored new ways of making art by being kinetic, interactive, using randomness, and having an optical effect. Duchamp's recollection of the bicycle wheel and stool in his studio was to set the wheel turning was a very soothing, very comforting, a sort of opening of avenues on other things that material life of every day. I like the idea of having a bicycle wheel in my studio. I enjoyed looking at it, just as I enjoyed looking at the flames dancing in a fireplace. This is Three Standard Stoppages that illustrates Duchamp's fascination with the concept of chance and his interest in mathematics. So what he did is he cut a piece of string 1 meter long. In this example, it's 1 foot long. And he just dropped it onto a surface, and that became the artwork. And then he froze the string in that shape, and he made multiple artworks using this technique. Errata music, he put a number of notes into a hat, and then he took them out of the hat, and in that order, he made a new score, a random score. And here's the score. In 1968, John Tingley did a piece called Homage to New York in the Sculpture Garden of the Museum of Modern Art. The piece was later nicknamed the Machine That Destroyed Itself. And he collaborated on this with Billy Kluver, who started experiments in technology and art. And so this used a lot of Duchamp's practices, found objects. You see some bicycle wheels. There's natural elements like flame, fire, and steam. And it's very random. Also in 1968, Duchamp and Cage did a performance called Reunion. And they played on a prepared chessboard. Duchamp was almost a professional, really a professional chess player, and Cage was not very good. So Cage was allowed to. Duchamp took some of his pieces off the board, but he beat Cage in about 10 minutes. So they had to do some other games with actually his wife that's sitting there that were longer. So when you move the chess pieces, it triggered a switch that either a live performer would perform or a radio or some other electronic device would be triggered. And so every chess game was a different score. It would never be the same because you never play the same chess game over and over again. This is John Cage performing Water Walk in January 1960. Oh, it's in the way. You can't see it right. I got it covered, but his score for this was not musical tones, notes. It was each object and exactly how long he would play it. And he had a stopwatch through the whole thing. But as you can tell, he's totally deadpan. And he just goes through the process of making these sounds. Namjoon Paik, the first, this gets a little confusing. Oops, I'm sorry. I just went ahead there. This is a piece that was performed at multiple Fluxus events. The score was written by Lamont Young, who was also a very amazing minimalist composer. And he wrote these score instructions. This one is draw a straight line and follow it. And the idea is to give the score to anybody. It could be an artist or anybody, and they perform it however they want. They're not told by the composer what to do. So what Namjoon Paik did is dipped his hair, his hands, his tie into this ink, into the ink, and dragged it across this piece of paper. So is this work dance? Is it performance? Is the piece afterwards a painting? Well, in Fluxus, it's all of those, all at the same time. So then he went and moved into using video and using the video TV as his medium. And it gets a little confusing because he did a full exhibition called Participation TV in 1963 that had 13 TV sets. So, so they were all kind of participation TV. So this is sort of version 1 that is related to the one in the collection, which we'll see in a minute. You speak into the microphones and all those electronics that are down there in front of you and some electronics in the TV, you manipulate the image. But you're not totally in control. There's a indeterminacy in the reaction of the electronics to you. And then this is another piece of the show. This is a recreation where he had 3 video cameras and he divided the 3 colors of the electronic of the color TV. So you saw the 3 colors separated and you could move around and the image would change. And this is him installing it, installing some works. So this is the work that's in the collection. So you can actually, so you can see it's pretty random. Even if the voice she's doing is similar, it can be very different. So loudness and tone will affect it. So this is magnetic TV. The next section is going to trace the development of Namjoon's progression to the video synthesizer. Namjoon would collaborate with Abe, who we met in 1963 in creating his synthesizer, which we'll talk in a minute. But this is Paik's idea of collaboration. I also envision the day when the collaboration of the artist and the engineer will progress into the unification of the artist and the engineer into one person. According to my past experience, the best results were achieved through accident and error. Therefore, if I give an order to an engineer, and if I don't go through all the experiments myself, that is the complicated process of trial and error, I will lose all those precious errors. I will simply get what I want and miss the disappointments and surprises. I have found that the byproduct is often more valuable than the envisioned aim. So this is Paik performing magnetic TV at an exhibition in 1968 called Cybernetic Serendipity. So he was manipulating a live TV image. So you can see the similarity between the magnetic electronic version and the mechanical version of the Duchamp piece. And of course, you can't perform these in a gallery or a museum at all. So we just have to imagine what it's like to interact with them. So the Paik Abe collaboration, Abe was an engineer. The first thing they did was create the raster manipulation unit, or AKA wobulator, which took that big magnet you saw in magnetic TV and took a lot of little magnets and surrounded the TV monitor with these magnets, and then you controlled the amount of magnetism and you could distort the image. And then they had sound hooked up to it, so you could create a kind of a visual music kind of composition. And then here's one using very low frequencies to create a very beautiful abstract image. And then here is the actual video synthesizer on the right. And the one on the left is a recreation of the synthesizer as an artwork, where on top are TVs being manipulated by the video synthesizer. And then here's the work in the collection, Virtual Wise, which is a portrait of Howard Wise, the gallery owner that I think David Burnett bought a lot of his works. And he was one of the only galleries that showed, was the first New York gallery to show this work of Paik's. And so the videos were taken off the screen and then turned into video disc players. That was the only technology that you could play back video in this kind of format. And Paik did a lot of portraits of his friends as artworks and acquaintances. They were doing pretty sophisticated stuff, all analog, no computer. So I'm not even going to try to pronounce Takis' Greek name, but there it is for everyone. I'm going to start with his signal light pieces. But first, when Takis arrived in Paris in 1954, he observed there were two groups of artists, ones who had been influenced by the Bauhaus, and one such as Tangley and himself, who looked to Duchamp. This was the moment when Takis befriended American poets Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, Gregory Corso, Brian Gysin, and Marcel Duchamp. All were in Paris off and on at the time, and each wrote an elegant poetic appreciation of Takis' work. He was self-taught in all the technology that he worked with. Takis was the embodiment of Paik's comment that someday artists will be capable of unifying artist and engineer into one person. Takis was that kind of artist. Signal light was inspired in 1957 after a trip from London. He noticed all the flashing lights and antennae that were in the train station. And this started this whole series of his signal series. He actually had a gallery in London called Signals. There's usually a wide variety of lights on long poles like this. This is a recent one. The long thin line was also, he was very influenced by Giacometti. So some of this kind of formal structure comes from some early work he did that looked like had a Giacometti quality to it. And the early signal works used bicycle lights as signals. These works are normally seen in multiples so as to reinforce the random signals that are generated. When seen in the public, they become like a beacon that can be seen from afar, drawing the viewer closer to the desired location. There's also a hypnotic effect of the blinking lights that refers back to Duchamp's mesmerizing effect of the spinning bicycle wheel. Magnetism. In this image, we see Taxis on the left and his longtime friend Guy Brett on the right performing. Brett is holding a strong enough magnet so when Taxis releases the pliers, they are attracted to the magnet. He also did a whole series of works where he attached metal objects to a fishing line or wire, and then it had a magnet have them float in space. So he's very interested in this kind of showing the energy of the piece. And here is his observation of his artistic practice of using the magnets. The magnet and the attraction of love are one and the same thing. When you kiss someone or when you hold your kids close to you, it's the same type of phenomenon at work. You are one with the other. You become a sphere. You are enveloped and you envelop the other with your energy. A magnet is not just an idea. It's something very concrete and alive. This bond, this attraction, established between two forms or two objects, constitutes a fantastic force of communication. There's a real magical quality to the work, especially when they become more animated. So the magnet would go on and off. So when it was off, the gravity would take over, and when it's on, they get pulled in. And they were all kinds of scale. So these are really big. This is from a show that I was fortunate enough to see at the Tape a few years ago of his work. And that's his friend Guy Brett there. That image. So now I'm going to talk about London Musical that's in the Vermeer collection. This is a large installation that's using the same techniques, which are at the core of this is a single or double mobile element, the needle, which an on-off electromagnet causes to bounce against a stretched and amplified wire in a shivering, trembling motion caught between gravity and the magnetic pole. So this is like an orchestra of these works. And this is when it was kind of quiet. And then there's another point where it was very loud. This is a detail. And here's the one in the collection. And when I came to the collection for the first time, I was so happy to see this work. I had been showing it in my classes that I was teaching. I had no idea what it sounded like or anything. And when I came into the gallery to see it, I was just blown away to see it in person. And there's an image of Taxis. In a number of comments in the retrospective catalog, Taxis made his interview with Mateen Bossat. He made reference to his aesthetics. And I'm going to quote some of the things he said. I followed the clues provided by the matter. Don't try to dominate it. When I use a stone, a piece of iron, a particular object, or a piece of machinery, it's always so I come closer to the invisible things and explore the unknown. It has nothing to do with aesthetic considerations. It's only about revealing in one way or another the sensory vibrations or the interlacing potentials for energy that exist in the universe. I think that the role of an artist, whether painter, sculptor, I think this is the role of the artist, whether painter, sculptor, or musician. As a sculptor, I never thought in terms of aesthetics or a relation to the form or even of visual qualities. What I was obsessed with was the concept of energy. Natural phenomena really impressed me. I always knew that material had its own autonomy. Coincidentally, Paik actually collaborated with Taxis in 1979 for a performance titled Duet that was a sound and music work. I haven't been able to find any other reference to it. It was in the catalog. In 1963, amid press accusations that his sonic performance art did not actually produce music, Paik responded with a statement from his post-music manifesto. Why is it music? Because it is not music. How can I define what is not music when no one in the world can define what is music? In the context of this lecture, one can make the same comment in relation to the work I've shown today. Why is it art? Because it's not art. How can I define what is not art when no one in the world can define what is art? How am I doing on time? Victoria? Anybody?
You're doing great, and it's so fascinating. Just keep going.
You're
Okay.
you're at 1:30, David.
Oh, I'm at
It's
30?
okay.
You're
Yeah,
at
Okay.
30.
Okay,
Don't
this is,
rush through it because this is really great, and we're just gonna do the same with you, Karen. We're not gonna cut you short, no way.
okay, this is a little, this is going to refer to how my own research over the years coordinated with the work I've shown you today. And also in the project that I'm doing for the Getty Pacific Standard Time, which is titled Future Tense, Art, Complexity, and Predictability. So I'm going to just talk for a few minutes about the sort of scientific history of that was sort of happening that led to what the sort of indeterminacy we see in these works. And it sort of, there's a fulcrum at the point of Henri Bergson that who most of these artists had read that I think influenced what they ended up doing. So I'll start. Darwin on Origin of Species, which was published in 1859, provided the theory of evolution. And Boltzmann, who in 1877 provided the current definition of entropy. Darwin was trying to quantify in some way the development of multiple of species and each instance of that species. Boltzmann had to account for all the trajectories of all the atoms or molecules in a system. So what both did was treat their systems as a large population. But in order to do this, they had to account for randomness and chaos in their systems. This was antithetical to their need to prove their theories deterministically. And this is how Darwin put it. I have hereto sometimes spoken as if the variations so common and multiform in organic beings under domestication, and a lesser degree in those a state of nature, has been due to chance. This, of course, is a wholly incorrect expression, but it serves to acknowledge plainly our ignorance of the cause of each particular variation. So this is, and both of them died trying to figure this out and never succeeded in doing what just actually was impossible, as we know today. One of the most important philosophers of this time, Andre Bergson, whose dissertation, what was published in 1895 under the title Time and Free Will, articulated a paradox that will become more profound as we moved into the 20th century. The paradox is between the cornerstones of Western intellectual thought, determinism versus free will. But once Bergson pointed to this fundamental paradox in Western society, it had to be dealt with. Bergson made two distinctions of our perception of the world, the actual and the virtual. The actual is all the measurements that science gives us. Deleuze described Bergson's use of the virtual this way: duration, durée, a virtual and continuous multiplicity that cannot be reduced to numbers. One of the aspects that informed Bergson's ideas before he turned to philosophy was his study of mathematics. He was actually a mathematic prodigy. One of the debates in mathematics at the time is whether infinitesimal numbers which are infinitely small quantity and a value approaching zero were worth studying. Bergson's virtual multiplicity has an affinity with the emerging acceptance of infinitesimal numbers in mathematics. The clockwork universe that Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz created in physics was to be upended by quantum dynamics at the atomic level. Physicists at the time viewed the world deterministically. For instance, we could not only know the past and future position of a planet, but how fast it was going at any point. But at the quantum level, these properties break down and become indeterminate. The discovery was established between 1925 and 1927 in what is called the Copenhagen interpretation that was led by Niels Bohr, Warren Heisenberg, and Max Born, which brought indeterminacy to physics. According to quantum dynamics, the more precisely the momentum of a particle is given, the less precisely one can say its position. Heisenberg coined the term indeterminacy relation, or the one that is more commonly used, the uncertainty principle. As with Darwin and Boltzmann's fear of their theory being left to randomness, Einstein could not accept the indeterminacy of quantum dynamics. As Stephen Hawking here states,
Einstein never accepted quantum mechanics because of this element of chance and uncertainty. He said, God does not play dice. It seems that Einstein was doubly wrong. The quantum effects of black holes suggest that not only does God play dice, he sometimes throws them where they cannot be seen.
Finally, I'll quickly mention Kurt Gödel. His idea, he came up with this concept called it proved the incompleteness theorem, which proved that mathematics could never be fully proven in a complete system. And on all of science, the 19th century, it was believed that they would be able to prove everything. And that sort of goes back to Bergson. But this idea of incompleteness of the mathematics system can be expanded, I think, because if you think back to Bergson's discovery of the paradox of Western thought, anything we create as a system and can imagine will have paradoxes, have things that you can't prove or can't prove whether they're right or wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for that very rich session. That's amazing to see so many layers to the pieces in the collection. That was really wonderful. I will certainly use that recording for my classes. It's so good. And now we're going to hear from Karen Moss, and I will introduce her briefly with just what she is currently doing, because her career is long with many different places and projects, and too long to talk about. It would be the entire session, I think. She's based in Los Angeles, and she's an art historian, curator, educator, writer. And her expertise is in conceptual and performance art since the 60s. And she is currently a professor of critical studies and director of the MA curatorial program at USC Roski School of Art and Design. Currently, she's working on a project of a retrospective of Alison Knowles, who is the last living and only female core member of the Fluxus group. This will open in Berkeley at the Art Museum Pacific Film Archive in next year. Hopefully we can actually visit, and then it's going to travel. So with that, I'll just mention that I've known Karen and David for quite a long time, and it's just incredible to see how varied their interests and points of view are. And I always love hearing their ways of interpreting and even getting into very personal aspects of artists and their work. So with that, Karen, the floor is all yours. Welcome. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Are we good? Can you see it? Good. So for the color, light, and motion series, I've chosen to focus on 3 works in the Rath Foundation collection, by Alan Rath, Christian Marclay, and Victoria Vesna. I'm going to discuss how they relate to other modern and contemporary works, both in the collection and at large. And I'm going to hopefully show you how in each there's a symbiotic relationship between the audio and the visual that compels the viewer to stop, look, and listen. Different in form and function, these works share sonic sensibilities that are in varying degrees repetitive and hypnotic, contemplative and meditative. First, I'm showing Alan Rath's desktop breather. You see it here on a tripod and also as displayed in the Rath Foundation collection, where it is literally on a desktop, a lucite pedestal. An innovator in electronic, kinetic, and robotic sculpture, Rath received a BS in electrical engineering from MIT in 1982, but was primarily self-taught as a sculptor. Often using old school vintage speakers and cathode ray tubes in his work, Rath wrote the software to animate his sculptures to perform in humorous ways. Desktop Breather is an early work made not long after the advent of the Mac and other desktop computers that became ubiquitous in the 1980s. And what's interesting is that, as you'll see, the speaker faces up. And as I play this short video, you will see how the center moves in and out, and the speed and the sound of the pulse increase gradually. And I do want you to know the sound is very, very low. So I will augment it a little. So it starts to go. And the pulsating sort of develops into a kind of frenzy. It's just very hard to hear it, unfortunately, in the video, but I think you can see how it goes from slow pulsing to a kind of frenetic activity. Rath's desktop breather is related to other anthropomorphized sculptures that he made that frequently emulate human physiological functions or physical gestures, such as finger tapping on the small video in his piece Waiting on the left, where you hear that kind of nervous energy of fingers tapping, and also in the eyeball speaker rover called Thumper in 1996, which has speakers with their kind of tops off to reveal these eyeballs. And this is something that can roll around and also take on this kind of anthropomorphized view. I'd like to go back to history now and really talk about the roots of some of what Rath does. Following Filippo Marinetti's Manifesto of Futurism, published in February 1909, futurist music rejected tradition and introduced experimental sounds inspired by machinery and found objects in homemade instruments played at evening concerts called seratas. And you see a cartoon here from an Italian newspaper of one of these seratas on the left. And on the right, we see Luigi Russolo with his Intona Rumori, which in 1913 are sound machines that in a sense are the predecessors of what Rath does with his sculptures. Following David's references to Duchamp and my own reference to the found object, I would be remiss to not mention the formal similarity between Rath's desktop breather and another work in the Vermont collection, his kinetic roto reliefs, which he worked on from 1935 to 53. These intricate drawings on discs are propelled by a motor to produce pulsating spatial optical illusions that move around and around rather than in and out like Rath's. And here, the visuality is obviously more critical than the audio, which is just the drone of the machine. I also came across in my research a memory of what Duchamp said in an interview with Pierre Caban. He said, I like living, even breathing better than working. So I thought that was a funny little affinity too with given the Rath piece. Finally, I'd like to mention another artist in the Vermont collection who assisted Rath with his early works. Milton Commissar also attended MIT and started creating light sculptures in 1973 using computer-controlled lamps and solid acrylic rods that extend from nodes that give the work both light and color. And when I play this video, you will see how each node contains a red, a green, and a blue lamp that combine into the hues of the spectrum in an ever-changing choreography of rhythmic and harmonious color. And here you see some viewers interacting with that piece. Sorry, there we go. Whoops. There we go. Now I'd like to move on to Christian Marclay. This is Marclay's wind-up guitar from 1994. And as you'll see, it's a life-size lacquered 6-string classical guitar that is outfitted with 12 music boxes and wind-up keys that protrude from the instrument's body so they can be played by the spectator. This allows for both the possibility of individual tinkering of a single music box or the cacophony of a sound, a kind of cacophonous sound, depending on how the individual approaches it. And I'm going to show you now a video of this piece being played by Alan Light at the Whitney, and you'll see how he actually plays the entire instrument. This was done in conjunction with a festival while Marclay had a show at the Whitney. We can see two ongoing themes in Marclay's work. First is the Cagean idea of improvisation and chance at the core of all of his experiments, from his collage visual scores and altered vinyl to his videos. And here I'm showing you a slide of Marclay's video quartet that includes more than 700 film clips appropriated primarily from classical Hollywood feature films and linked by their focus on music and sound. So in each of the 4 projections, you see an actor or an actress performing music, speaking dialogue, or singing. And I have no time to show a video of this, but I highly recommend you looking at it. It's really amazing. Second is Marclay's fascination with machine age mechanical inventions. David mentioned the watch before, the clock before, and this is a still from Marclay's The Clock from 2010, a 24-hour looped video that features clocks or timepieces all synchronized to the local time, resulting in a real-time viewing of clocks that actually have the time in that particular location. With his process-oriented experimentation, Marclay is clearly the offspring of musique concrète and acoustic music, but there are also other specific art references to his work. And once again, we go back to Marcel Duchamp, his Sculpture musicale, which he worked on probably in 1913, which is the, there we go. It worked on in 1913, probably right around the time he did the bicycle wheel. So this composition was actually, according to Arturo Schwartz, just a piece of paper scribbled with a score inside of the green box, which is the actual notes for Duchamp's very important work, The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelors Even. So the musical sculpture, which I'm going to play now, clearly anticipates the work of John Cage and also some of what Marclay's doing. So there is no video of this being performed, only this audio. So what you hear is not only the music box, but also the ambient sound as well. Oops, okay. This brings us back, of course, to John Cage's prepared piano, which really is, you know, the other strong influence on what Marclay is doing with the guitar. And I'm going to play you now just a brief video of a prepared piano in concert. And once again, once again, you can see the score on the right, which David also showed, which are the Cagean notes, the visual score that alert the performer at which intervals to manipulate the screws, the spoons, the objects that they are inserting into the piano. I also wanted to point out that Cage, of course, influenced very much the artists involved with Fluxus in the early 60s, who also, like Marclay, made versions of their own homemade instruments. And what's really interesting about the Fluxus event scores is, of course, that they are not necessarily performed by an artist author, but can be activated by anyone. So here we see Fluxus artist Joe Jones, who participated in the early European Fluxus festivals and co-founded a store with George Machunas that featured homemade mechanical music machines. Initially trained in jazz, Jones then studied composition with John Cage and also Earl Brown, and he is known for event scores played on machines such as we see here, including music object on the right that is an actual guitar, really a direct relationship to the Marclay. I also wanted to show Ellison Knowles's work because even though Joe Jones's works were very mechanical, Alison Knowles used beans as both a prop and a sound-making device in many of her works, including her bean garden that we see on the left. But more recently, she has made these homemade instruments that are not mechanical, but literally organic. And they are called bean turners. I'm going to play a short excerpt of her performing with a bean turner. And I think what is important about this is the idea of the sort of combination of soft and what we might think of as aesthetically pleasing sound versus kind of very jolting and kind of very sometimes violent sound, which also can happen with a Cajun piece or with Marclay's work as well. And now, last but not least, we come to Victoria Vesna's NanoMandala. Made with nanoscientist Jim Chimniski. It is a video projection onto sand of a mandala, a cosmic diagram and ritualistic symbol of the universe created by Tibetan Buddhist monks from the Gaden Lopa Kanstin Monastery in India for the first time in the US at an exhibition at LACMA called Circle of Bliss, Buddhist Meditational Art in 2003. So essentially, this piece was made and then shot in video, then imaged in a nanotech laboratory with optical and scanning electron microscopes. And viewers watch as images of a grain of sand are projected in evolving scale from the molecular structure of a single grain to a recognizable image of a pile of sand. And I'm going to just show you a short video now of this. Oops. Sorry. And what's really interesting about this piece is that the viewer can also interact with the sand as they watch these images unfold in a 15-minute sequence, as they listen to the chanting of the monks who created the mandala on site, that was mixed then with ocean waves and by sound artist Ann Nemitz. So that is what the sound element of the work is. Inspired by watching nanoscientists at work, Vesna noticed how they purposefully arranged atoms, just as the monks laboriously created the sand mandalas grain by grain. Both processes require extreme focus, attention, and patience. She also observed how, quote, the Eastern and Western cultures use these bottom-up building practices to create a complex picture of the world from extremely different perspectives. This particular sand mandala, which you see on the left, represents the temple palace that houses the conclave of 62 deities presided over by Chakra Samvara. The intent of the sand mandala is to consecrate the planet and its inhabitants to bring about purification and healing. And its mandatory destruction after days of labor. The monks spend days of labor, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact video, but it took like literally 2 minutes to actually take it down, is a metaphor for the ephemerality of our life on this planet. Afterwards, the sand is collected in a jar, wrapped in silk, and transported to a river or another body of moving water to return to nature and spread blessings. Now, I want to talk about two works that I think have a relationship to the visuality of Victoria's work. The first is on a purely formal level, Charles and Ray Eames' famous film, Powers of 10 from 1977.
Near the lakeside in Chicago is the start of a lazy afternoon, early 1 October. We begin with a scene 1 meter wide, which we view from just 1 meter away. Now, every 10 seconds, we will look from 10 times farther away, and our field of view will be 10 times wider. This square is 10 meters wide, and in 10 seconds, the next square will be 10 times as wide. Our picture will center on the picnickers, even after they've been lost to sight. 100 meters wide, the distance a man can run in 10 seconds. Cars crowd the highway, power boats lie at their docks. The colorful bleachers are Soldiers Field. This square is 1 kilometer wide, 1,000 meters. The distance a racing car can travel in 10 seconds. We see the great city on the lake shore. 10 to the 4th meters, 10 kilometers. The distance a supersonic airplane can travel in 10 seconds. We see first the rounded end of Lake Michigan, then the whole Great Lake. 10 to the 5th meters, the distance an orbiting satellite covers in 10 seconds. Long parades of clouds, the day's weather in the Middle West. 10 to the 6th, a 1 with 6 zeros, 1 million meters. Soon the Earth will show as a solid sphere. We are able to see the whole Earth now, just over a minute along the journey. The Earth diminishes into the distance, but those background stars are so much farther away that they do not yet appear to move.
The other work I'd like to show is Sabina Ott's What's Here is Everywhere, which is a group of paintings, sculptures, site-specific installations, and drawings spawned by a digital maker image from which multiple forms are sourced. So Sabina made the maker print that you see in the top on the left from maps, photographs of various landscapes, flowers, and altered text from Gertrude Stein's The Making of the Americans. Then she took this maker image at the top and telescoped it out to make the 8 progressively larger and larger segments of her work that you see in the installation on the right. So these digital prints emanate from the progressive chain of a square starting from the top corner. She then fabricated these individual images in wood as tabletop topographic maps on pedestals, forming an imaginary landscape that filled an entire gallery. And this was in an exhibition that I curated called Topographies. Now, I want to point out that with Vesna's work, there are multiple vantage points that we see from the both the video camera and the microscope. So in Sabina Ott's work and in Powers of 10, it's a telescoping out, but Victoria's work shows us both a deep dive in and a pull out. Ultimately, Vesna's work is a conceptual and perceptual deep dive that takes us on a journey that traverses both time, technology, and space. It begins with the Tibetan Buddhist ancient practice of making the colorful, intricate mandalas using only the human hand and sand, i.e. no technology, then moves from macro to micro to nano using the most highly advanced technology available today. It allows us to contemplate the mandala. Sorry, I should have this back again. I'm so sorry. Ooh. It allows us to contemplate the mandala from its totalizing vantage point of the temple palace down to the infinitesimal grain of sand, which under the gaze of the microscope does not appear at all minute, but once again becomes expansive and infinite, like the universe, which you see in the black and white image, which was taken with the electron microscope. Revisiting NanoMandala within the context of the pandemic and our current consciousness about human frailties, social injustice, and the temporality of life, Vesna's work forces us once again to take a moment to meditate upon the vastness, the preciousness, and the precariousness of the universe, and hopefully to perhaps amplify our relatively minute role in the world by contemplating and acting upon its survival. In closing, all these works incorporate both audio and visual elements and forms of technology, ranging from Rath's old school altered speakers and Marclay's wind-up machine age mechanisms to Vesna's work that incorporates both no tech and very high tech. Each artist in their own way asks us to stop, look, and listen, then to interact. Hopefully also to think about how each references very rich histories and constructs new meaning that maybe will promote action, cogitation, and contemplation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so honored and flattered and humbled at the same time with this overview. And I have to say the NanoMandala has come back into action recently with the pandemic. It was presented at the Pure Lands farm in Topanga, which is a medicine Buddhist center, and really thinking about health in particular in relation to the pandemic.
Yeah, I just want to say I also know, Victoria, that other aspects of your work are engaged with environmental issues and healing the planet. So it really, knowing more about your own practice since I very first saw this work and the pandemic kind of combined to me for me to read it in a much more focused way.
Thank you so much. And then backtracking, I learned something new. For all these years that I've been around the collection, I never knew that Commissar actually helped Marclay, that they worked together. I never knew that. And I never saw somebody playing the guitar, Marclay's guitar, that was laid flat by Alan Licht. I always imagine it like it's presented, you know, where it's on a kind of a pedestal.
Yeah, it's almost like a slide guitar.
Yeah, very interesting. So I'm just wondering if there's any questions from the audience that we can bring in, and we can also discuss between ourselves as well. Maybe stop sharing the screen at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
No, that's okay. Bess is joining us, which is wonderful. So we don't have any questions, so we can just proceed ourselves and talk a little bit about the current situation. And I was really struck by how all the pieces that you picked were really, both of you, were connected to sound, vibration, frequency. And this is so critical to me right now, thinking about it and just wondering, you know, there's been a tendency for sound art to be, you know, purist, where it's just sound and there's no visual. And then visual arts, a lot of times the way they're interpreted, it would be focused on the visual, but both of you really went into this connection where the sound and frequency actually are part of bringing in the invisible, the inaudible to the attention of the viewers. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's why I kind of referred to it as a symbiotic relationship, that it's not separate. And this actually goes back really very specifically to the theory of intermedia, because with intermedia, the actual difference between an intermedial work and an interdisciplinary work is the actual codependency and interlocking nature of different practices of visual and audio combined with objects and different media. They cannot be separated for the work. So the work doesn't work if they're separated. They work together in concert, pun intended.
And then it seems like for both of you, the ghost of Duchamp, and we actually have the little Duchamp sitting there. The ghost of Duchamp was just constantly threading its, it's incredible.
I think it's important that we say that neither one of us saw each other's presentation.
Ah, amazing.
And we didn't really talk very much in advance. However, given, my scholarship and interests, I've always been interested in Duchamp, and I've always been, that led me actually quite directly to working on Fluxus and Intermedia and Cage. And because David accompanied me on all those dissertation research trips and to all the exhibitions of Fluxus work that we've gone to throughout the years, I think that there's been a lot of kind of interchange between how we look at things. Not that everything emanates from Duchamp, Dada, and Fluxus and Intermedia, but it's just become a kind of a conjoined or interest of ours.
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah, for me too, Karen, the one major thing that had effect both on my artwork and I think eventually my curating, which came later, was going to the exhibition in Spirit of Fluxus at the Walker, where Karen was a consultant. And I met these Fluxus artists, and we actually became friends with some of them afterwards. And it was an amazing experience and life-changing for me to actually meet that generation of artists. It's a very rare opportunity, and so it had a major impact. And so that's one story about how it's affected me.
Well, and then also as David actually kind of transformed from a practicing artist and teacher into more of a curator, it so happened that some of the theory and ideas that are part of that work, because music and sound and chants is so important to Fluxus, actually informed his interest, I think, in digital and new media work.
Right.
And one, it precedes it, but it's actually quite related in a lot of ways.
I mean, I started doing digital work in 1990, and I went to the Walker in 93. So I was sort of, but I think in my curating, it's helped me in approaching media and not purely as a technological curator, which I think is a problem with some first generation media curators, that I have a wider view of what is technology and how ownership.
I also think it's interesting how your current projects intersect, because you're working on the whole scientific idea of there's the person that we forgot about.
I was wondering.
That's Marcel.
Marcel. That's why I said the little Duchamp, the Marcel.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I didn't get it either. Good one, Victoria.
Yeah, no, I was saying for your idea for the PST, where you're working on predictability or non-predictability, it just goes so well with the deep interest in science that informed from Duchamp on to really look at how our reality is actually measured and there's this need to dominate it and to control it, and it's kind of slipping from us, and to embrace that slippage and to embrace complexity and play with it. And then Allison comes in with this other way of looking at the same thing, actually, but in a much more fluid manner, rather than the mechanistic kind of playfulness. It's very nice balance, I felt, for both of your talks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I would like to, for the benefit of the foundation, if you could reminisce a little bit about your stay there as residents and what some of your impressions were and your relationship, how you were, Karen, you really shifted that whole collection in a major way, and Bess totally accommodated you and really just listened. We all listened to everything you were saying and,
We did
and
everything you
suggesting to
said,
us.
Karen. We did everything you said.
Everything you
It looks
suggested, we
so
went
great.
for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the real strength and the pleasure of the collection is this historical thread that it pulls. I mean, even from going back to Urke's first talk, right, about looking at the very earliest work in the collection, and then seeing some of the more modernist work, and then now the contemporary work. There is a thread there. And it's not just color, light, and motion. It's actually these kind of art historical roots and roots in the history of, music, 20th century avant-garde music. And it's all there. And it's actually a very specific narrative, but it expands as you move through history. And I think that's what's really interesting. It expands from the purely kinetic into these other areas. And, if I'd had time, I was going to talk about Jenny Holzer as well, which is then yet another whole kind of different thing about language and conceptual art, which we didn't have time for today. But that's what I appreciate about the collection, is how it moves through history. And it is really, it's going to be so great that it's going to be installed in one place. So for that reason, because it's a great tool. But I just had a wonderful time, because I was both helping to create a kind of floor plan to reinstall the collection, but it was so wonderful being on the property and being able to also have some time and space. I actually was in the throes of finishing my dissertation at that time, and I really welcomed the respite of being there, just in this gorgeous place with all this art and wonderful scents and beautiful foliage. No miniature horses yet, however. I missed the miniature horses. Would have loved to have seen the miniature horses, but except for that, it just was a great place to be. It was just a great place to be. And I found it very inspiring.
And we will invite you back to talk about Jenny Holzer and also David, because you have so much more to say and share, and you've really contributed so much with your presence there. It's I'm sure Bess agrees. It just was phenomenal to have you as residents there.
I want to say also, for me, seeing that much kinetic work and sound work, it reminds you what you can experience looking at a book, and that this work needs to be, you need to be in front of it in a different way than a painting or a sculpture, which you still, have to be in front of, but there's such a experiential thing you only can imagine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
And to that point, I remember when I was suggesting to David in the 90s, late 90s, to put the collection on the web, he said, no, I refuse until it can be full video, just full video. And at that point, that was just like, no way is it going to be full video, but now we can do it. And now we can have this collection really accessible, and we can even go further and have 3D versions of pieces where students can look through it.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important thing about making this collection accessible to me has always been, from day one that I walked there, is to show the lineage that we all owe to. I
Mhm.
feel that so many times I teach media artists and they just think they're doing something new. And I'm thinking, no, 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 no. There's,
Oh,
there's so much.
for
And
any of
it
us,
doesn't
yeah.
it doesn't really hit home until they see it and
Right.
hear it and they're in that dimension. And that you can do a little bit of that with video, but nothing like being in the space. So I think we were very, very fortunate to have that experience. And it is so lucky that the collection stayed together for the Butler.
Mhm.
So we hope that they will continue to have it as one whole room, or Bess, what are they planning with? Can you share with
Well,
us,
it's
with the
going to be
audience?
in the David Vermant Gallery and the Beecher Center, and then throughout the rest of the museum and the grounds. So
Great.
not in one room, but throughout the museum.
Bess, I'm asking from just a curatorial question. When you agreed to work with them, did you stipulate how often the work needs to be up for the public to see? Is there something that says,
No, we did not stipulate that, but they've already installed many of the pieces, and the installation right now is ongoing. I'm going to be going there in September to see exactly what's happening.
Mhm.
But the collection was a gift, and they really didn't accept any stipulations.
Okay.
I feel that they will really have our best interest at heart with it, and I had to go with that.
Well, no, I think that
Sure.
I think that's important. But one other thing I just wanted to throw out there. Now you've had a couple different curators come and visit. You've had some different talks going on. It would be great if they would also consider doing another kind of publication, not just one that documents the collection, but one that has more interpretive analysis and material from different curators and different people coming to look at it. And it could be a really interesting project for them as well. It could be both people who saw it on site at the original site and then people who write about it as it's going forward. It's just an idea.
Yeah,
That's a fantastic idea, actually. And maybe this series will motivate them, because we're
Sure.
getting so many great people like you to give feedback and put it in historical context.
Oh, we lost you, Victoria.
Sorry about that. No, no, it was really noisy, so I actually put it on mute for a second.
Oh.
Sorry. All right. Well, this was fantastic and such a pleasure to see all of you. I really miss being in the real space. I got my first vaccine, so,
Yay.
so
good.
hopefully we
We
actually
both
get
had
to see
two.
it. There you go.